Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Connecting with Jennifer Filzen. I have with me a very special guest who I met at the AHR Expo in Chicago in January of 2024. And Mindy, I hesitate to say your last name because I am so nervous I'm going to get it wrong. Could you please tell us the correct pronunciation of your last name?
Yes, last name is Gulati.
Thank you. Because I was gonna definitely get that G wrong. Yeah, Mindy Gulati. And she is an attorney. She was a speaker at the Women's Breakfast for ASHRAE. ASHRAE stands for, hold on, let's see, American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers.
Yes, you got
Man,
it.
that's a long
Mouthful.
that's a long one.
Yeah.
But you specialize in DEI. So, and DEI stands for diversity, equality, and inclusion. Did I get that right?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank
Close.
you. See, it's funny. It's like I know what it is, but I never can say it correctly because I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
live it like you do.
yeah.
Anyway, you just really inspired me, and I was just so taken with you. I had to have you on the show. So, Mindy, if you don't mind, just give us kind of an overview. Who are you, and how did you get to this wonderful role?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. And it was so fun meeting you in person at the conference, even though it was freezing in Chicago. We stuck with it and stuck it out. Yeah. So little about me, I guess, from career standpoint is I was always interested in civil rights and social justice topics. Going way back as a kid, I was raised in a family that really valued and put a priority on justice work. And so I knew sort of probably around middle school that I wanted to go to law school and that I wanted to do something related to civil rights. And so I went to college at University of Utah. That's where I'm from, and then went to law school in Southern California in San Diego. And I started my career as a public defender. So I was a criminal defense attorney for a period of time, about 10 years, working as a public defender, owned my own firm, and I loved it. I loved working sort of one-on-one with clients, and I felt like I had a really good impact on the people that I was serving and that I was advocating for. And I really loved it. Being a public defender was a sense of pride for me. And the California public defender system's really great. So they're the best and the brightest lawyers. A lot of TV shows show public defenders as like bubbling and fumbling around, and it's just really not accurate, at least in California, because they're sort of the best trial lawyers you're going to get. And I loved it. And then, I had my first child. So I have two kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I had my son, and I felt like I wanted to spend some time with him. And it was really not the plan. The plan was to go right back to work. And then when I met him, I was like, I don't really love the idea of being away from him so much. And so we ended up moving to Austin in 2012, and I took a couple years off and had another child, and really started thinking about where do I want my impact to be. So I'm a mission-driven person, so I don't really do things just for to make money or to for personal reasons. It's really more for like, how can I in my life further justice and equity and civil rights, and everything that I do is going to lead to that on that path. And so I took a couple years off having babies and spending time with them. And one of my friends said, "Hey, you would be a fantastic consultant." And I had never even thought about it. And it was really a coffee with a friend in Austin, and he was a healthcare consultant at a big consulting firm. And he said, "You're a lawyer. You know the policy and the process side. You could be a strategic consultant on equity and inclusion and business and leadership." And so I took the plunge. And so I started my consulting firm in 2016. So it's been over 8 years, and it has been just absolutely fantastic. And now I get to make a bit bigger impact. As an attorney, I was making a real impact with the individual clients and their families, but it wasn't as system wide as I wanted it to be. And so now I get to do some of that bigger, more, hitting on institutional norms and systems and structures that uphold a lot of the inequities. So I love it. I'm so happy. I mean, I always will be like a public defender and criminal defense attorney at heart. And I think being an attorney makes me really effective at what I do, but I really love consulting. And so it's been an awesome ride. So that's a quick overview of where I started and came from.
No, I love it. I love it. And, when you spoke that morning, I really didn't know much about DEI and how corporations needed to embrace that. And so I'm not going to make you repeat your whole speech here, but like for the uneducated who need to learn more about it, what is it about DEI and what is it that we should be doing in the workplace as well as socially to make sure that people are feeling more included?
Yeah. So, I'll kind of take this two ways. The first thing I'll say is that there's a lot of pushback on DEI that's not rooted in anything. So it's really like a negative PR campaign for political reasons.
And I'm so
And it's not, yeah, and it's not based on anything. So it's not based on that DEI has had terrible outcomes. Actually, DEI work's been going on really since the 1950s, and it's had great success, and everybody in a workforce right now benefits from what DEI has done. So it's not just for certain groups. DEI has benefited every single person at work.
Yep.
And so that's the first thing that I will say is that there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty going on about what DEI is. And unfortunately, it's even being passed in laws, and it's even being widely spread. And I mean, we could spend an entire hour talking about that. I mean, there's a lot of historical reasons for that, but for the people who are new to this conversation or kind of confused, it's really not accurate at all. And so that I'll kind of leave it at that. And if we want to go in more in depth, we can. But at the heart of, in this term of DEI, language shifts, acronym shift. But really what happened was, in the 1950s, desegregation became the law of the land in the United States. And so once that became the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education, and then a number of other court cases related to the US military and housing and employment. And then we had a big employment law come into play, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which protects everybody in a workplace. Once that started happening, companies had to say, okay, we have to integrate, we have to figure out how are we going to navigate these new laws. And that's really where this work started from. And so it is old work. There's a lot of research and data to support how important having an inclusive and fair workplace is. And so when I kind of was upcoming as a lawyer, a lot of it was called diversity work. And then it became diversity and inclusion, then it became diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's all the acronyms, but really what it boils down to is that we, by law, have to provide people with a place that they can work free of discrimination and harassment. But also more than that is that's like the lowest bar, is like following the law. And unfortunately, a lot of companies don't follow the law. And that's why there's still so many employment lawsuits. But above that is, employers sort of gradually started to see that when you have an inclusive workplace, a place where people are seen, they're valued, they're heard, they can grow in their career, they're appreciated, they're able to find their career path, and they're able to do that without being penalized because of their identity, because of their age, their race, their gender, religious beliefs, whether they were pregnant, because a lot of laws started coming around things like disability and pregnancy. What we found is that people are more productive, they're more loyal, they're more efficient. And so the data for the last, 30 or 40 years that's really been studied, has shown that the more diverse and inclusive your workforce is, the more profitable and productive and innovative you are. And so it started sort of as almost forced because of integration and desegregation. What now is that most people, at least hopefully, get to experience a workplace that is free from harassment and discrimination, and is a place where we can thrive. And so what I tell people a lot is that we all benefit from this work. Some people benefit more from this work because, yay, fireworks. Some people benefit more because they have been in situations that had put up many barriers. But all of us benefit from it. And I think that's what I wish people would really focus on is getting out of a scarcity mindset that there's only enough for a couple of us, and instead go to the abundance mindset that there's enough for all of us. And the companies I work for, and I work for lots of companies and law firms and nonprofits, when we increase fairness and access and inclusion, it never causes someone to lose out. It just doesn't.
Right.
So right. It doesn't mean that somebody loses something. And that's where this unhealthy narrative, and it's really a PR campaign, by a couple very wealthy people who feel like they're living in the scarcity mindset. And it's wild to me that billionaires can have a scarcity mindset, but they do, because they haven't reached a point of like having enough. And so there's not a contentment aspect to probably their moral and ethical core. And so that's what I push back on is that, you have to look. I mean, I don't want to work somewhere where certain people are mistreated, because that's not going to be healthy for me, even if I'm not the one being mistreated. Right. Like we've all been in workplaces where someone's being mistreated, and that doesn't just affect that person; it affects all of us who are around it. So,
oh yeah. Well, even for example, if you were to go out to a meal at a restaurant with somebody, and somebody in your party mistreats the server, like don't do that. That's not cool. So whether you're the client seeing it, or whether you're inside the actual tribe that's running that business seeing it, it doesn't feel good. And if you want your company culture to thrive, you have to make sure that everyone feels a certain sense of pride and ownership, and there's trust, and there's sharing, and there's allowing them to act upon their great ideas, because I am not the person that holds all the great ideas. Every single time I say, hey, I've got a problem to solve, to my team, they're the ones that come up with the better solution. So why on earth should we, discriminate against those that might see it from a different perspective and might offer a really amazing solution?
Yeah. And that's why the numbers, if you're just purely looking at financial reasons, companies that are more ethnically diverse outperform, from profitability standpoint, their similarly situated counterparts that are not as ethnically diverse by 38%. I mean, money talks. So, I mean, unfortunately, like sometimes that's the place you have to go, but it's also that I think after COVID, and I just had a very long meeting today with a CEO of a large engineering firm, 2 hours talking about culture and talking about the people, and what we all know, and if you don't know this, you're not paying any attention, is that employees now do not want to work for companies where they are not valued, seen, heard, appreciated. They don't want to work for companies where there's favoritism and bias, and they don't want to, and they won't. So they'll leave and they'll take their talent with them. And the engineering world, for example, is fiercely competitive for talent. And engineers are kind of have their pick of where they want to go. And I'll tell you what, they're not going to where they're getting paid the most. They're going to where they're going to be treated the best.
Yeah.
And I see that every day. I mean, I see, and I listen to engineers who come to me. I listen to lawyers who come to me and say, I either want to stay at this firm because I'm treated so well, even though I'm not making as much, or I'm leaving this firm because even though I'm going to maybe take a $10,000 a year cut, I would rather that than to be on the receiving end of negativity. And the one thing I'll say that's so interesting, and I'm going to say this to whatever platform I get on, is because again, what's happening in the push against DEI is just not accurate. But I could tell you story after story of young white men in various industries: legal, medical, engineering, business, tech, who I'll interview them as part of assessments I do of companies. And they will, without any prompting by me, they will say, I really came to this company because they have a good DEI program. And these are the guys who aren't necessarily the ones we think of who benefit, but you know what? They want to be in that environment. So they want to be in an environment where that their colleagues are going to be valued and respected, and they're not going to be paid less because they're a woman, or they're not going to be held back for promotions because of their race, and so, or because they have kids, they're caretakers. And I hear that, and it kind of always, it gets me, and I hear it all the time. And these are young, white male professionals who are valuing DEI as much as anybody, because they know that they want to work somewhere that cares about people. And and there's the companies that aren't going to do this work, but I'll tell you what, the companies that do this work are the ones that are going to thrive, and they're the ones that are going to remain sustainable.
Yeah.
So this political pushback is, I mean, everyone should be very careful in taking the advice of this PR machine, because I will tell you, as a lawyer, you are setting yourself up for risk upon risk upon risk. Because if you are anti-DEI, what you're saying to your employees is, we do not care if you are harassed or discriminated against. And I will tell you what, I know a lot about employment law, and I have a lot of employment lawyers across the country that I do work with, and they are ready for all the cases that are about to come to them.
Really?
Because when you say, like, oh, we're getting rid of DEI because it doesn't matter to us, what you're saying is, okay, I mean, to me, as a lawyer, that's a whole legal strategy of saying, well, this company is basically saying, if you are, marginalized in any way, or if you come to us and say you're being mistreated because you have a disability, or because you have a sight impairment, or you're Jewish, or you're Black, like, we don't care anymore. Like, we don't care, because we don't want to talk about uncomfortable things. We want everything to be perfectly fine. And the way to get to things to be good is through equity and justice. So if you don't want to worry about racism, sexism, homophobia, then we have to do the work to set the foundation to get there. We're not just going to hope and wish it away, because I mean, we have been doing, Title VII was passed in 1964. So, I mean, it's not that long ago in some sense, but it's a long time ago. And there are still thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of cases filed for Title VII violations all the time, because it's still happening. Discrimination and harassment happens every single day.
Oh, yeah.
And I think sometimes people have gotten the impression that it doesn't happen. It happens all the time. I mean, we could spend 12 hours of me telling you what I just know right now. Because one of the focuses of my practice, aside from general consulting on culture, leadership, strategy, DEI, is I do something called, I call it crisis coaching, or it's conflict coaching. So what it is, and this sort of just came to me by word of mouth. It's all word of mouth referrals, but when I basically work with executives and leaders who have made some, I think, really bad choices. Sometimes it's intentional, but who have done sexual harassment, who are homophobic, who are anti-Black, and they have been investigated. So I come in after that, and I come
Wow.
in sometimes to determine, is this person someone that can be coached into better behavior? Is this person a legal risk to the company?
Wow.
Is this, and so I do a lot of it. It's a big part of my business. And, you know, every week I get calls of people who have either very explicitly or implicitly been harassing and discriminating against employees. And so sometimes people will say, like, I can't believe it's happening. And of course it's happening, because we are new into trying to find a path forward to justice. And when you so it's interesting to me, because I think that the companies who aren't investing in DEI, not only are they going to not be as profitable, innovative, creative, but they are also setting themselves up for a huge legal risk, because what you're basically saying is, we're taking a political stance
Wow.
that these issues don't matter. And their employees are saying, oh, so you don't want an inclusive environment? Like, that's what's wild to me. I can't just imagine being against inclusion. I'm like, so you're pro exclusion. Or if you say, like, I'm not for equity. Equity is fairness and action, fairness and access to opportunities, resources, information. So then you're saying, oh, you want there to be differences in how people are treated and how they can access opportunities at work. It's mind-boggling that somebody is against inclusion, because I mean, we are not living in the Stone Age. Like, we are not living in the 15 or
Right.
1600s.
Right.
Like, what are we doing that this is an appropriate conversation
Right.
that you can be against inclusion? It's wild to me.
Well, it is interesting because being in the auto repair industry for as long as I have, and now getting into HVAC, and also too, like way, way back when I was like 19, I was the first female assistant scoutmaster for the Boy Scouts in the state of
Mhm.
Florida. So
Mhm.
like kind of used to,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. You tell me I can't do something because I'm female. Watch me. And then, of
Mhm.
course, I always rise. But it is interesting. I had one of my clients who's also just an amazing human being and a business coach. And he's a very respected person in the auto repair world. And he says, I'm so glad that more women are getting into auto repair
Mhm.
as service advisors, as technicians, as owners, because when it's time for me to sell my business, isn't it nice that I can sell it to 50% more of the population?
Mhm.
You know, so
Yeah.
when it levels the field of who
Mhm.
can be the owner, and it's not just a dude, because
Mhm.
oftentimes you'll see a mom and pop shop, and that means the usually it's
Mhm.
changing, but like the man is the owner and the wife is the helper. But
Yeah.
it's switching. I have a lot of
Yeah.
female owners,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
exciting. A
Yeah.
lot of female technicians, a lot of female service providers, and they're crushing it. They're
Mhm.
crushing it. Their numbers
Yeah.
show they are more
Yeah.
profitable and they have a larger, more loyal client base. So you're right. I'm with you, Mindy. I'm like, really? But
Mhm.
it is it is that scarcity mindset, isn't it? It's
Mhm.
people pushing back because like, oh, there's just not enough, or
Mhm.
I can't, bring everybody in. Well, you can still qualify them based on skills.
Mhm.
And then also too, whatever I also just love company culture, and I teach classes in marketing and
Mhm.
company culture as well. So I'm with you,
Yeah.
sister. I am just like,
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
loving this conversation. And a lot of times, let's just take gender out of it. Let's take minorities out of it. Let's take disableds or LGBTQ.
Mhm.
Like, let's just take everything out of it and just make sure it's a new person, right?
Mhm.
I've heard owner after owner after owner complain about, well, this person that I hired said that they had the skill set,
Mhm.
and then we put this person on this project, and it turns out they don't know anything. They are
Mhm.
book smart, they got
Mhm.
their piece of paper, but they are no master technician,
Mhm.
or they are not skilled in it. And
Mhm.
so I learned a long time ago that when you point at something, three fingers are pointing back at you, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
asked them the question, do you have your standard operating procedures documented?
Mhm.
And a lot of times they don't. They just
Mhm.
have tribal knowledge, which is a fancy way for it's not written down.
Mhm.
It's in my head. I've been doing this for 40 years or 30 years or
Mhm.
20 years, whatever. I've been doing this for so long. And I expect someone else to have my knowledge of what's in my head immediately
Yeah,
absorbed in their first 3 months of working for me. Like
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
impossible. So I
Mhm.
have seen the frustration, and then you add the layers of, oh my gosh, this person may not be able to lift that transmission, or that
Mhm.
person is in a wheelchair, or that person doesn't speak the language, or whatever. And I can totally see them losing their marbles over it.
Mhm.
But a lot of it has to do with the fact that no one is a good mind reader. So
Mhm.
you need to have everything written down
Yeah, yeah,
so you
yeah.
can train people more effectively, they can be more efficient, and you're not getting frustrated and your attrition rate goes
Mhm.
lower because
Yeah,
people aren't just leaving you because it's like, God, this is a shitty work environment.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
and
oh,
that's
I love
and
this.
that's sort of what I mean, that's the nuts and bolts of equity work is, and again, there's a billionaire funded PR machine against this. So it's just it's become so weird that people are thinking about it in the opposite way of what they should. But equity acknowledges that we have to make sure that people have access to information, resources, and opportunities that they need to thrive, and that access is going to depend on them as an individual. So not there's no two humans made the same, and people come in with their lived experiences. They come in with, you know, the society putting biases and stereotypes on them. They come in with lots of qualities that are never the company never realizes or optimizes because they prejudge them. And so to me, like to your point on like standardization, a lot of the equity work I do is that it's documenting things. It's creating safe for hiring best practices, structured interviews, and having really consistent onboarding, and I create a lot of policies and procedures and handbooks related to onboarding, and I call it inclusive onboarding. And all it is, though, is making sure that everybody gets it the same chance when they come on board, and that they get the tools that they need so they can be successful. Now that they still have to use those tools, because a lot of times the pushback is like, oh, well, I don't want to hire unqualified people. There's no one saying that.
Yeah.
But I don't believe the most qualified people have been being hired, because what happens is we build these fences that keep people out from applying and from coming in, but then we build even higher fences. We can't even see the talent. Like we can't even see over the fences that we've built. Those fences are these barriers, systemic barriers that keep people out but keep us from seeing the talent. And I mean, for women, um in the trade that you're talking about, I work with a Fortune 500 company. They're the largest commercial truck dealer in the country, and they have a big portion of their business is servicing commercial trucks and selling commercial trucks. And I've been working with them for years, and hearing from their technicians and their mechanics and their salespeople. And women in that company are outperforming men in sales of big rigs. And and unless you have that data, you don't believe it. But women tend to outperform men in sales.
Same thing
Women
in the
tend to
service
outperform
advisor role.
men.
Yeah. It's
Women tend to outperform men in jury trials and in trials. Like, so, and that's not because women are better. It's because some women, most women have a different skill set. And that's the value of diversity, is because what I'm skilled at, someone else might not be, but I'm not skilled at everything, right? Like, so what I teach a lot of the companies I work with is you want a culture that optimizes people's talent. But you have to first see their talent, and you have to not put up barriers to seeing their talent or letting them experiment, or having psychological safety around, trying new things and making mistakes. And so, I mean, there's so much to this work, and everybody benefits from it. I mean, everybody benefits from an equitable and inclusive workplace. There's nobody that does not benefit. And what I tell people all the time because I get a lot of resistors to my work when I come into companies. And I sit with them as long as they need, right? I had a client last week say they're about to hire me, and they said, we just want to make sure you understand how much hand holding we're going to need. And I'm like, look, I'll hold your hand for 2 years if you need me to, right? But I'm not going to let you stay stagnant. Like we're gonna move, but I'll keep holding your hand. But one of the things that I think is important is in this work and in thinking about culture and how do we create these inclusive workplaces, we just have to be mindful that there's not nobody knows everything, and you want to optimize people with who they are, and you're missing out on a lot when you don't have an inclusive place, because you may have somebody who has an amazing idea, you may have somebody who has a skill that you don't know anything about, and you're leaving that on the table when you don't want to do these things. And the thing I was gonna say is, for some of these resistors, I will let them know, like, if you're lucky, you're going to get older. So if we're lucky, we're going to get older. And as we get older, we're going to have different needs. Your needs change as you get older. And you will hope your employer is not a place where there's age discrimination and bias.
Ooh, right.
And so you can't stop turning older unless you die. So you better hope that you have inclusive and equitable practices around age. The other thing too is that anytime we can get diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
We can get in a car accident and be paralyzed.
Yes.
We can have a stroke and need assistive technology to get our work done. We have no idea if that's going to happen. That's not something that we can completely solve for. And so you better hope, if you have a stroke, that your workplace is accommodating to you. And guess why it will be? The American with Disabilities Act, ADA, passed in 1990,
right?
Inclusion and equity. Yep. And so you don't know. I mean, most people are going to need equity as they get older, but people get diseases. I mean, I'm working with someone right now who's a leader at a firm whose husband had a stroke, and she has to take care of him. And it's a really tough situation. But guess what? They've got a really solid, inclusive company culture that understands her needs and will adjust and accommodate what she's going to need over the next year or so. And it's not giving her special treatment. It's saying, you're a human who's going through human things, and we love your talents. She's an internet architect. So they love her talents. They need her talents. So they're going to work with her to make sure that she can still flourish, even though this thing has happened. Now, she didn't plan on this happening. She's not somebody who was saying, demanding equity, but inclusion and equity and this understanding was in place at that company, and she benefits from it. And so everyone benefits from this, and we should be, and I sometimes I just wish people would not need to have their own personal reason and just want the best for others. But if you have to really have a personal reason, like, you should be invested in this work no matter who you are.
Mindy, you're just such a breath of fresh air. I just adore you. So, you really have a lot that makes you special and unique. And I think you touched on your why, but I kind of want to dig deeper into your why. You are just making the world a better place, one company at a time. And I'm just so proud of you. Was there a particular thing that, I mean, you grew up in this, but like, was there a specific event that just resonates in your heart and memory that was like, I have to do this? Or is there one story, or I'm sure you have tons of stories, but what was that thing that was like, yes, this is what I have to do?
I mean, so there's lots of things to this, but if I had to say one thing, and this is, I've told this story a lot. I mean, there's two core stories, but I'll tell you just one of them. Is when I was in early elementary school, my mom, who was, single mom of me and my sister, we were laying, I mean, I'll never forget any of this. We would lay in her bed at night, and she was watching the PBS special Eye on the Prize, which was about civil rights. And it's like one of the most famous PBS documentaries called Eye on the Prize. And I don't know, I don't even know how old I was. I was like probably 8, probably around 8 or 9. And I remember watching that series, and it was like a few nights, and this is what, well before like DVRs or anything, or this was like when you had to watch it the time it was on, and like,
Yes, better catch it now or you're
some
gonna
of
miss
us
it.
remember those days, right? And
Yeah,
so,
right.
but it was like several nights long. And I remember watching it, and I had this like feeling of it just in my core of like, I have to do something about this. Like, I cannot allow Black folks in the US to be treated like this. And my mom and my grandparents were like, this is our problem to solve. Like, white people made this mess. And so we have to be the ones to be cleaning it up. Like, should not be on Black folks. And I remember 2 parts of Eye on the Prize. There was one where they were being hosed down during protests, and there was just like all these white people watching. And I remember just being so angry, like I could feel it in my body. And then in that series, Eye on the Prize, they did have a part on Emmett Till and like his open casket. And I just had, and then there were other events earlier in my life also that were important, but that was when I was just like, man, I am not going to live in this world with this stuff going on.
Right.
And that has driven me. It drives me every day. I don't do easy work. I don't do fluffy work. Sort of all the work I've ever done has been in this pursuit. And I feel like it's my obligation. I have benefited from, a lot of privilege in my life. I grew up very, in a poor family, but I am a white woman, and I have a much easier, much easier time in life in the United States than most people. And I'm telling you, watching that series, I was like, that's it. There's nothing. And as a little kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I wanted to like be, swim with orcas kind of person. And I like love that. But it was so interesting because if you look at my mom has saved a lot of my reports, and like until I was about like in 4th grade, they were all like whales. And then, as you can tell, I still love whales because I have whale pictures everywhere in my office.
I'm a
But
mermaid as well. Here's
but
me painted
yeah,
as a mermaid. That's a whole other
there we
story.
go. There we go. But
Yeah.
once that
Fish.
shift happened for me,
Yeah.
like once the shift of like this kind of call, this like visceral call, like there was no longer this feeling I'm going to be a orca scientist or marine bio. It was like immediately, it was like, all right, like I know my path and I know what it's going to take. And I mean, I just had my head down and did it. And so, I work in community with Black folks every day. And, my sort of, I think life's mission is to do what I can in my sphere of influence to make the world more just and equitable. And I think workplaces are really important. I'm not on the front lines of activism because I've chosen to go into where people work. But this is what I tell. And the other thing that's a little different about me, I don't work with companies unless I work directly with the CEO. So like I won't work with the company unless the CEO and I can I can text them, call them at any point, and when we're ready to rock on projects. But what I was getting at was, when I think about why I want to spend my energy and effort like in place, because I could do it in criminal justice system, I could do it in politics or government, but we spend so much of our life at work, and we spend a third of our day, if sometimes more, right? Half of our day sometimes in work. And so if I can create cultures in workplaces where that people feel good about, guess what happens? They go to work and they feel appreciated, included, valued, seen, heard. They're growing in their careers. They're doing good. And guess what they do? Then they leave work happy, and they go home and they're nicer to their families and their neighbors and their communities, and they have time to volunteer because they're not stressing that they got to apply to a new job. And that to me is like, that's the change. Because and I love that, I mean, everyone has their space to make changes. Like, I love people that are working in rewriting law, but I'm rewriting company policies because I want people to leave their work and go home and be sweet to their families. And you can't be sweet to your family, and you can't love on your kids or help your neighbor with their trash can if you've been at work in like a really toxic environment. Like, you can't be. And so to me, workplace is central to equity and justice, in specifically in, the United States, because it is where we spend so much of our life, and it affects everything outside of our lives.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because what are the signs that people are not happy at work? And the signs are, they're going outside of the business, talking amongst each other, standing out in the parking lot where there aren't any cameras and the boss can't see them. And it was funny because I've been working for myself from home, and I have a team, but we're all remote workers. So there's nobody standing out in the parking lot bitching. But I do remember those years of standing out in the parking lot bitching about what happened inside the office that day. And, and it was interesting because I had to go to a meeting in the San Jose area just a few days ago. And and I'm driving to this location, and I see like this group of guys, just like, you could tell from their body language that they were just having a bitch fest. It was interesting because I was like, oh, I bet you things aren't so great over there.
Yeah. And I mean, you're going to have those times when like you want to vent about work, but I mean, I think that to me, one of my measures of success is when I hear from employees that say, gosh, like, I feel good. I feel excited. I feel like we're heading in this good direction. And because I know they're going to go home and feel better. I do work a lot. I don't know if I would be necessarily I think I'm kind of a workaholic, but I just have like I have like a very deep work ethic, and I like working, but work is not the most important or the only thing in life. And so I don't like I don't like when I see people working in toxic cultures, because it becomes their entire existence. Because when you are harmed at work, you don't just leave that when you clock out. It's with you. But when you're happy at work, when you're appreciated, that also helps. And so to me, that was one of the biggest reasons I left doing trial law, was because I was having a very good impact on my individual clients. But this is bigger. And I mean, it does all go back to watching that documentary as a kid and just being like, man, we need more people in this fight. And and kudos to my family too for saying, yeah, like, it's our responsibility. Like, we made the mess, we need to go clean it up. So
Oh, I love that about you. And I love that about your family, how progressive and forward thinking they are for recognizing that. And it's been fascinating ever since COVID, ever since George Floyd trial. Like, it's been fascinating how TikTok and people being able to document things with their phones and getting news straight from people versus curated news networks. It is like, in particular, TikTok. I love TikTok. I spend so much time on TikTok. It's been helping me get a lot of video diaries about women's social progress in recent years. And it's just been fascinating how the collective mind, the hive mind, has allowed people to finally articulate. And someone might say something like, gosh, I had to leave my marriage not because he harmed me, but because the emotional and mental load was so heavy. I didn't feel like I was in a partnership. I felt like I was single while married. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that they could articulate it. Because years ago, when I was in a failing marriage, I couldn't quite say exactly why
Yeah.
I was so unhappy. But that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was the
Yeah.
emotional and mental load of like, really, you're at home all day and you can't just
Mm-hmm.
clean the dishes? Like, come on. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like so trivial, but it's a bigger
Yeah.
picture. And then
Yeah.
when the George Floyd incident happened and he was murdered by those police officers, I was in a women's group of entrepreneurs, and it was a beautifully diverse group of women, and a lot of them were Black, and they were like, "We need to talk about this." And I was
Mm-hmm.
so grateful that they shared, like, look, we need our white sisters to say stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
we've had
Mm-hmm.
enough. This is
Mm-hmm.
breaking us. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God. And then we became more aware of like, oh wow, I didn't even know microaggressions was a thing. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
so amazing that we are articulating and having conversations, and they're not comfortable, but it's so cathartic that they're
Mm-hmm.
healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you see this political endeavor, PR campaign, if you will, to like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, let's put it back under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it
Mm-hmm.
back under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, no, 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 the cage is open, and
Yeah.
we're talking about these things, and I'm so grateful, because you can try pushing water uphill,
Mm-hmm.
but water is,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
progress is going to be
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
forward.
Well,
So
and I think that, I mean, the one point that I think is important to make is this concept of solidarity between people. And even if you are not affected by something, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. And like that's like till my dying breath, I want to scream about solidarity, because you do not have to be impacted by something for it to affect you. And we have to raise kids and raise communities that see that, because you want people to be there for you if you need solidarity. And I do think that, I mean, these conversations have been going on for hundreds of years. I mean, there's a lot of, if you go back to Sojourner Truth, a lot of her writing was on solidarity, right? And Frederick Douglass. But now it's so accessible now through social media and through, so it's a lot more accessible,
yeah,
because it's something that, and I just, I'm happy that people are having these conversations, because again, we're not going to unring the bell. It's already happening. And I think that, and not everything you see on social media is accurate, but I do think that people are documenting their stories. And I love reading memoirs. I love reading like autobiographies that people write, because I think it's so interesting to see how people think about life,
oh yeah,
because it's so different, but it can give you new language. Like I just read this book um, um, called Falling in Love with Being Human, or Falling Back in Love with Being Human. And it's written by a trans femme woman. And I'm not kidding you when I say that book has changed my life,
wow,
because there's two sections in that I've never heard anybody articulate, and they're for me, right? So they're personal to me,
wow,
and I've never had it said that way. And so I read the book because it looked interesting, and I liked the title, and I just like, I'm going to read this. But that is like that book, that this one quote in this book has given me like this whole new guide on life. And it's from someone who's from a very different background than me, right? They're a different race than I am. They're trans, they're younger than me. And it's just wild, because that's why I think it's so great to share your first person stories, and to put names to things like a mental load, or we had Tarana Burke created that hashtag Me Too,
yes,
back in 2014, and
yes,
to have these things that were like, oh yes, like this is me, or this has happened to me. And so that's the power of podcasts and narratives, is letting people listen to how other people view things, because maybe they'll say something that sticks with you. And that's, to me, what solidarity is about, is just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean that it's not something that you should be spending your energy to. And you will probably find something in their stories that resonates with you or pushes you to another level. I mean, that's what this book did for me, is it pushed me to a different level, because I'd never thought of this aspect of myself in this way. And it was just, it's a beautiful book. So
Oh, I gotta check it out. I got
yeah.
you. What, remind me the title again?
It's called, I see it on my table over here. It's called Falling Back in Love with Being Human.
Falling Back in Love with Being Human. I have to check that out. I really do. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, you have so many people in your life that you serve. Um, and we've talked a lot about that. Okay, now I gotta know, what do you do for fun? Or
Good
is this fun
question.
for you? Because
Good
you're such a
question. Yeah,
fighter. You're such a
this is
warrior.
kind
I
of,
love this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say that so I call myself solar powered, meaning I have to be outside. So I love being outside.
Yeah.
So fun for me is being outside. My kids like truly save my life every day because they help me have fun. They help. I tend to be a very serious person. I tend to be very focused. I work a lot. My kids saved my life, honestly, because they were the only people, little did they know their little baby selves, but they were the only people that made me feel like I was good enough without accomplishing anything. Like, and they were babies. So, but yeah, so I have a
Beautiful
ton of fun with
feeling.
my kids. We have a blast. We have so much fun together. And I love being outside. But I am not, people tell me I'm very funny, but I'm not like, I don't think I'm the funnest person alive because I have too much work to do and too serious, but people think I'm funny. And I'm like, okay, good for you. Cause I barely laugh. I'm like, I'm glad I make you laugh. Like I could use some more of that, but no, but
Okay,
kids.
so the really fun thing was, will Mindy ever become a stand-up comic? Now that would be
Yeah,
a whole different level, but
yeah,
that could be, boy,
yeah.
you'd have a lot of material to work
Yeah, I'd
on.
have a lot of material, right? It would be like the most depressing stand-up comedy routine ever. Be like dark humor if you're contemplating if you're having existential dread, come to this show. She'll make you feel better about your existential dread.
Dark humor has its place. I
Yeah,
love
it
that.
does.
If
It
you're
does.
having existential dread, that is
Yeah.
brilliant. Yes, you are funny. You are very funny, Mindy. Uh,
Yeah.
I love it though. I love it how you're so consumed with this passion. It's like, all right, even when I'm having fun, I'm gonna be like fighting the world. I just love that about you. You're such a David to the Goliath of what's going on in the world. Now, you have so many stories, you have so many words of wisdom. Can you please impart some advice for anybody watching about how they can make the world a better place, how they can get closer to the goal line of where we should be with
Mhm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. I would just say that within your sphere of influence, so that's your family, your friends, your neighbors, your work, um, you can make an impact. And every day you make a choice of how you're going to spend your time and and how you're going to spend your money and who you're going to support. And I think that you have to take responsibility for that. And so I believe that you can change the world around you every single day. I do it every single day. And sometimes it's as simple as checking on my neighbors who live across the street who are older. And they're an older gay couple. They're like in their 80s and they're the sweetest little Italian women. And making sure that they know that like I support them and not just as a neighbor, but like who they are and they don't have to be awkward with us. So I think there's a lot of things you can do. It's actually not that difficult. Make better choices, become informed, speak up, like leverage whoever you are in whatever spheres you're in. And if it makes you feel uncomfortable, that's like the best, the most exciting thing. Like to me, we should always be pushing ourselves to do something a little more uncomfortable. And then I would just say that, find a community of people to be in solidarity with that you can have their backs, but also they can have yours. And be, I mean, honestly, just be honest. Like I think a lot of people have a hard time engaging in these conversations because they're not truly honest with who they are. They're kind of conflicted. And that's okay if you're like that, but be honest about it, right? And so but yeah, I mean, your sphere of influence, think about the choices, think about how you talk to people, think about, one thing I've been telling myself a lot is, for a long time, like go slow, like move slower in this world, because then I can be more intentional in how I treat people. And so move slower, be more intentional, take responsibility for your decisions. That's truly the path forward. So.
Amazing. Okay, so Mindy, let's tell everybody how to get a hold of you because I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are like, oh, I have to talk with her.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can email me. My email is mindy@fundamentaladvisory.com. That is my company's name, Fundamental Advisory. My phone, I'll give you my phone number because I'm a Gen X child. So like I will pick up the phone and talk to you. My
Yes,
phone number is 714-362-5594. Yeah, just email me, call me, text me. And I'd love to keep having these conversations with people.
for sure. And then also too, do you have, are you active on social media? Do you have any books that you've written? Is there anything else that we can just get more of Mindy?
Yeah, I mean, I have a presence on LinkedIn. I don't give a ton of my time to LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn can be a little exploitative in how much they want us to give. And frankly, I'm too busy to like do too many posts. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I always put the books I read every month on there. So if you're ever interested in some books, I'm an avid reader. So,
So cool.
but yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.
I love it. I love being an avid reader. I know my bookshelf is like way crowded. I need to get
Yeah,
another bookshelf, quite
yeah,
frankly. I do.
yeah.
I can try to do a Kindle. I can try doing Audible, but I love holding the books and
Hmm.
dog-earing the pages and reading
Yeah,
them multiple times and having them stashed by my nightstand. It's just, I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
how
It's
I am.
awesome.
Ah, Mindy. Everybody, thank you so much for getting to know Mindy Gulati. She is phenomenal. She's in Austin, Texas. I do hope that you'll reach out to her. We will have all of her information in the show notes. But if you need an expert in DEI and company culture, I hope you will reach out to her. She is phenomenal. And I hope this resonated with you. Go out and make yourself a catalyst for better things in the world. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.